Hello. Today I want to talk about money laundering and about how it is that the UK has a reputation for being the world centre for money laundering. At the end of this video, I will tell you something that I was told by somebody who is a money launderer and quite a big one. And what he told me, I think it kind of, the penny dropped, and I realised how they're all able to get away with it so easily. Now, a lot of money laundering is done through our tax havens, because we have these tax havens where people can form companies and they can deposit money, and then that money gets moved to London in order to buy property. In London there are lawyers and there are accountants and there are estate agents and service providers and everything you could possibly want. And so it's really, once you bought your property, then it's your money's on the right side. And it is said, according to Transparency International, that there are 84,000 houses in the UK which are owned anonymously. They're owned by companies in tax havens. And of that, they've identified 6.7 billion worth that are bought with suspicious wealth, and 1.5 billion worth that are bought by people who are very close to Putin. So it's often very difficult to find out who owns these properties, or impossible. And the government, of course, has tried to do something about this, though I think probably quite half-heartedly. They brought in something called the unexplained wealth orders in 2018, 6 years ago. And since when they've actually pursued 4 cases. And the reason they don't pursue more is because the moment you start chasing somebody to know where the money's come from to buy whatever they've got, they employ expensive lawyers who start the clock running, and the bill goes up and up and up. And the Treasury get concerned that they're spending so much money, and so they're reluctant to start new cases. The government have also brought in a new act called the Economic Crime Act, which is supposed to make it easier to find out who owns properties. But I'm pretty sure these guys, these people who have got huge amounts of money, they've got access to the cleverest accountants and cleverest lawyers and so on, and they'll find ways to get around it. It is just known now that London's the place to park your money if you've got lots of dirty money, and people from all over the world know this. And it's not just criminals. It's not just drug dealers and people smugglers and extortionists and so on. It's also very often politicians from poor countries, and I think this is pretty disgraceful. I mentioned in a video 2 or 3 weeks ago about Tulip Siddiq, the Minister for the City, who's in charge of chasing down corruption, amongst other things. And I mentioned how her aunt was the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, and how she ran away, having been accused of embezzling between $3 and $4 billion, I think it was, and she's now in exile in India. She owns lots and lots of property in London. It's said that she and her associates own £400 million worth of property in central London. And of course, Tulip Siddiq has not benefited one tiny penny of any of this. There are others. It's one poor country after another where you've got rulers who suddenly become very rich. Take, for example, Nawaz Sharif, the former Prime Minister of Pakistan. He seemed to become extremely rich, and he and his extended family have got no end of properties in central London, apparently. There's the Kenyatta family from Kenya, who seem to own masses of really big businesses in Kenya, and they also said to own no end of property in London. A lot of it was revealed through the Panama Papers. And so it goes on, and time after time after time, these poor countries are being absolutely robbed by corrupt leaders, and we're facilitating it by making it very easy for them, using our tax havens to hide their money and to spend their money and to keep their money. And I saw an interview recently with Imran Khan, the Prime Minister who succeeded Sharif, and who is now in prison. And he said the following. I'd like to quote it for you about this leaders embezzling money from poor countries. He said corruption is an issue for all the poor countries. I've come to the conclusion that many countries are only poor because of corruption of the elite. The rich countries must treat money taken out of poor countries as terror financing or as drug money. He says, because terror financing drug money affects the richer countries, the laws are very strict. But there's hardly any attempt to stop this plunder of poor countries. I feel there is no incentive for rich countries to repatriate money or take action against these people because they benefit from them. They are benefiting from billions of dollars which are flowing into their businesses and properties. And it is so difficult to get your money back because the laws basically favour the crooks. And you can understand that, can't you? All these billions and billions flowing into the country. Why would the government particularly benefit from stopping it? It's almost a moral issue. And so it goes on, and so our reputation as the place, one of only probably 2 places in the whole world where you can get rid of dirty money easily, remains, and it's really bad. Now, the other thing is that I want to talk about concerning money laundering is all these businesses that people suspect are involved in money laundering. You know, the nail parlours and the car wash and the American candy shops and the souvenir shops and the Turkish barbers and the restaurants and fast food shops and so on. It seems that it is very easy to set up a company in this country and to start a business and to launder money. And you look at some of these businesses. You look, for example, at there's been a lot of publicity lately about the Turkish barbers. I don't think any of them are Turkish, by the way. But anyway, these shops that are quite nicely done up, quite expensive, fitted out, and how they never have any customers, and how you might get 3 in one street and so on. Everybody says they must be up to something. Everybody says there must be money laundering, but nothing happens. And you look at, for example, the other classic examples, the American candy shops in Oxford Street. I mean, people openly talk about them as being involved in criminal activity, particularly in money laundering. These are shops where some of those shops in Oxford Street cost £10,000 a week in rent, and some big international brands can't afford to be there. And yet there are these shops that are selling stale candy with no prices on it, very often out of date. And where you go in the shop and you say, how much is this? They'll give you a price. You say it's expensive. They'll give you another price. And where they're always empty. And it's so absolutely obvious in so many of these businesses that they couldn't possibly be viable. And yet they carry on trading. And you have to wonder why it is, why they're not stopped. And this is where I come to what I was told, and what I'm about to say, I would ask if you're going to comment, and I'd be very grateful if you do comment, but if you do comment, please do not speculate about what particular sector of the economy I'm talking about. But there was a group of businesses set up by some people from a very corrupt country. I think the original ones came here with golden visas. How the others came, I don't know, whether they were already here, whatever. Anyway, it amounted to maybe 50, 60, 70, 100 companies all over the country. And what they would do was they'd form a company. Now, if you form a company, you've got 18 months before you need to put any accounts in. And so they would trade for 15 months, say, and then they'd form a new company, transfer the business over to the new company. And then the old company, they'd write to Companies House and say, it's no longer trading, can we strike it off? And Companies House would strike it off without question. And so they kept doing this, so they didn't have to ever send in any corporation tax. They didn't have to, very often they did avoid rates and business rates and all sorts of other taxes. They had all sorts of angles for, I'm talking about this in the past, it's still going on, all sorts of ways of evading tax. And in this particular sector I'm talking about, it was just so blatant. And they would even, there were so many of them, they were all over the country, but the people managing these businesses would almost openly admit that they were money laundering. And it was so obvious that they were not making enough money to pay for these businesses. But there were none of them at all concerned about being caught. They used to laugh at the possibility of being caught. And so I knew somebody who had who'd been a victim of these people, because he had a business in competition and he was really squeezed out, and in the end he had to sell out to them for next to nothing, because they don't have to make a profit, so they can compete with anybody and undercut anybody. And so this guy had introduced me to somebody who was part of this organisation that was doing this alleged money laundering all over the country. And I was keen to know a bit more about this. I was very interested so I got to sort of befriended this guy, and I got to know him a bit. And I went out for a coffee with him one day, and I spent a long time talking to him. There was about 2 hours, I think. And towards the end of this conversation, I said to him, look, I said, everybody knows you're money laundering. He didn't say anything. So I said to him, are you not worried about all being arrested, put in prison? And he looked me straight in the eye and he said, they know what we're doing. They know exactly what we're doing. The government knows what we're doing. HMRC knows what we're doing. They will never touch us. And I said, how can you be so sure? He said, look, we're bringing millions of pounds into the country. We're opening businesses all over the country. We're employing people. We're paying taxes. Certainly a lot less taxes than they should have been paying. Why would they want to stop that? I don't know. Suddenly it occurred to me then that is probably the answer. I think there's an argument that for HMRC it's very difficult because they're very limited and they haven't got enough staff and so on to go and catch people who are trading in cash. It's very, very difficult. And what do? You stand outside the shop for all day to see how many customers they get. I mean, you just can't you can't do it. But that seemed to me that as good an explanation as any as to why we allow all these businesses, which are obviously not viable businesses, to go on. And whilst that, I mean, there is an argument saying, yes, no one should condone criminality, but there is an argument saying there are benefits. It's not entirely negative. But one of the big negatives is that, as with my friend's case, I mean, if you're competing with these people, if they come into your sector, then you've had it. I mean, they're putting honest, decent businesses out of action. And funny thing is, this particular guy who I spoke to, he was right at the top of the organisation, or just below the bosses, and they're in and out of this business, that business. I used to have a look and see what they're doing and so on. And this particular guy, I noticed a few months later, was the director of a company that was opening a restaurant. And this restaurant was in South London, and it was on a main road. It was in a moderate area. It wasn't a rich area by any means. It was just an ordinary area. And he became a director of a company which was opening this restaurant. As soon as the restaurant opened, they all resigned, and another guy took over as the sole director. And this restaurant was out of town. It was behind a petrol station. There was a gym nearby, I think. There was a Nando's next door, and maybe a KFC or something. Previously, the restaurant they took over had been an Indian restaurant that had gone bust. Now, they opened this restaurant. They did it up very nicely, absolutely brilliant. And they started... whenever I in past, it's always very quiet, but they started trading. And just to give you an idea, this is, as I say, is a restaurant in a so-so area. They have on their menu steak, which is from £36 to £96. Wine is from £32 a bottle to £467 a bottle. When they first opened, they had 2 bottles of wine on this menu, one for £4,000 and one for £4,750. They've now gone. Champagne is between £96 and £3,000 a bottle. Spirits between £160 and £800 a bottle. And there's a 12.5% service charge. Now, how that can make sense, I do not know. I mean, those are Mayfair prices. And yet, they're in South London, in some moderate suburb. But anyway, as I say, it's not good when a nation has a reputation for being one of the two places in the whole world where you can deposit your dirty money. And I really hope that this government will do something about it. But there's not a great incentive to do it if the money keeps flooding in. So anyway, that's it. If you've watched this far, thank you very much indeed. If you haven't already subscribed, I'd be grateful if you would do so. And so until next time, thank you for watching and bye for now.